Hello my friends, it's Fiona and welcome back to my channel, channel. I hope you're all very well. I actually filmed this video already yesterday, or at least I thought I did, and I was really happy with it. I felt like it was the best I've spoken about books in one of these, and I felt like I conveyed my thoughts really well. Even if none of those things were true, it was definitely the most comfortable and confident I've felt talking to my camera. And I was feeling really good about it. Got up to turn off my camera and discovered it had turned itself off 2.5 minutes into recording. So I'm going to try again today, and fingers crossed it works out better this time. So I started this month with Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This was actually my first ever pre-order. Not because I was super excited about the book, but because I was excited to support the author. So I used to watch Lucy Jane Wood's YouTube videos. She did like lifestyle vlogs. I'm pretty sure she still does. I used to watch them quite a lot when I was younger. I haven't so much for a while, but one came up earlier this year, or maybe towards the end of last year, of her saying that she'd written a book and explaining a little bit about it. And I actually didn't know this before, but she said that pre-ordering really supports and helps the authors, so that's what made me decide to go for it. And when it arrived, I was so excited to read it. I just wanted to get straight to it. So I actually read this in a reading vlog where my Instagram followers chose my reads, and I was really happy when this one won the poll to be read. This book is about Belladonna Blackthorn, or Belle, who is a 29-year-old witch, but she lives not a very witchy life. She works at Luna Books and she has a horrible boss, but she has lovely friends. She absolutely loves her job. She puts her heart and soul into it, and she doesn't really utilise her magic. And then she gets a letter explaining that as it's coming up to her 30th birthday, on her birthday she will have to go to a trial to decide if she's worthy of keeping her magic. And she didn't know that was coming up. She didn't know that was a thing, so she's like, oh, I don't know if I'm actually gonna qualify because I don't really use my magic. She uses it to like pick an outfit for the day, but she doesn't do it much beyond that. Nobody in her life apart from her mum, who is also a witch, knows that she's a witch, and she intends to keep it that way. She likes to keep them very separate, and she just wants to live a fairly normal, straightforward, happy life, which is what she's pretty much got at the moment. So this book is described as a cozy fantasy, which I didn't really know what to expect going in. I've not read one before, and it wouldn't have necessarily been something that I would have picked up, but like I said, I wanted to support Lucy Wood. Yeah, when I was reading it, I got it. This is cozy, and I understand why it's called that, and I understand why people absolutely love it. A thought occurred to me while I was reading it that I absolutely love Whispering Willow ASMR. I love her channel. She's my favourite ASMR artist by a mile. And I kind of felt like if her channel was a book, this would be the book. Like, the vibes are similar, although I absolutely love her channel. Like I said, I found this book okay. So they didn't quite match up like that for me, but I don't know if that will make sense to anyone else, but to me, like, if this book was a YouTube channel, it would be Whispering Willow ASMR. If that channel was a book, it would be this book. Hope that makes sense. I did sometimes find there was a little bit of unnecessary description, but I do think she did that on purpose to try and make it relatable with the mundanities of life and the way people just go off on tangents and stuff like that. But I kind of feel like if you're reading it for escapism, you don't need to hear about all the boring aspects of a fictional character's life and conversations. Like, do I need to know about her mum's neighbour Fred down the road walking his dog past and saying hello? And you're hearing it secondhand, like you're hearing it through her mum on the phone. So it just felt like kind of unnecessary and just filler, a few bits of it. I've seen on Instagram that some people have absolutely adored this book, and I can totally understand why, but I don't think it was the exact thing for me, and that's fine. I'm still glad I read it, and I show my support to the author. I would recommend this if you want to try out a cozy fantasy, but I probably won't be in a hurry to pick another one up myself. And I gave this 3.25 stars. Tea break. Next I read my poll winner for the month, which was The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. And for the first time ever, only one book, this one, got any votes on my poll. None of the other books got a single vote, which has never happened before. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm guessing it's because it was a thriller in the month of October, so it's gonna win over other things. And it's obviously also quite a well-known one. But I went into this blind. The back says, I'll just read the back to you. In a large house in London's fashionable Chelsea, a baby is awake in her cot. Well fed and cared for, she is happily waiting for someone to pick her up. In the kitchen lie 3 decomposing corpses. Close to them is a hastily scrawled note. They've been dead for several days. Who has been looking after the baby, and where did they go? So it does not give you a lot going in, and I feel like that's a good thing. I think generally that is the way to go with thrillers. I read this pretty quickly over a few days, and I did not make any notes on it, so I don't really remember anything that happened now or how I felt. I remember thinking that it was fairly average. Like, it was fine, it was a bit of fun, but it wasn't anything that took my breath away, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I will definitely pick up another Lisa Jewell book, but I won't be actively searching for them. It'll just be if one comes up, I'll read it. But I know some people read this and they're like, oh, I've got to read her whole backlist, and I don't feel like that. Is it still recording? Yes. Can't be too careful now. Paranoid. Next, I finished my first audiobook of the month, which was A Bit of a Stretch by Chris Atkins, narrated by himself. And this is a memoir about Chris Atkins's experience of being an inmate at a UK prison in around 2015-16, I believe. And I'm still not 100% sure what his crime was. He made like TV documentaries where he exposed people for all the bad stuff they were doing, like people in power, I think. But he didn't go about it in a perfectly ethical way, and then was a bit naughty about trying to cover it up. That's the gist of it. To be honest, that part of it's not really important. It's all about what it was like for him being in prison and what he witnessed there, and just basically what an absolute shambles the UK prison system is, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. But he really hones in on the fact that these people are not being treated as people whatsoever. They're not being cared for, even at a bare minimum. They're getting locked away for 23, sometimes 24 hours a day because they can't staff it, and also because nobody seems to care. So they can't socialise, they can't have any contact with their family. Apparently all of the requests that they put in and things that they're allowed to take in or told that they're going to be allowed to do when they're there don't actually end up being true half the time. And it's just honestly a really horrible place to be. And I know they've all done something wrong. Well, actually, not all of them, let's be honest. But the situations that they're put in these prisons are never going to stop people from reoffending, and it's no wonder that the reoffending rate is so high. He also said that the illiteracy rate was absolutely astronomical in prison. So many of the inmates couldn't even write their own name. So again, it's a no wonder they've ended up there. If they're not going to be able to do any other job, they have to turn to crime if they want to have any money to survive. It's just a mess. And Chris, got trained by the Samaritans as a listener. So they have a listener programme where the Samaritans come in, train up people they think appropriate to be a listener. And then whenever any inmates are feeling low, mental health, suicidal, just need someone to talk to, they can talk to a listener. So it's kind of like an unpaid and untrained therapist. Actually, I think they did get paid a bit of money for it. Or did they? They did get paid. They can do jobs in there to get a bit of money for their canteens, to get snacks and phone money and stuff. But I'm not sure if the listener job was a paid one. I can't remember. But it did come with perks, like he was in a really big cell. He also acknowledged the fact that being a white, well-educated, middle-class man, his experience was vastly better than a lot of other people's in there, and his wasn't good anyway. So that gives another element of perspective, another level of perspective of just how shocking the conditions are. The accents did start to grate on me a little bit, kind of midway through, and then for the rest of the book. I commend him for trying, and at first I was like, oh, this guy's pretty good at accents, and then after a while I was like, actually no, he isn't, and they're quite jarring. But it's one of them, like, it's fine. That's a me thing. At the end, he did give some really great points for improvement, and he made a really good point that nobody's ever won, or no party's ever won an election by saying they're going to put more money into prisons. Nobody, but the general public don't want to put someone in power who openly admits they're going to give more money to prisons, but in doing that, everybody ends up paying so much more money because the reoffending rate is higher, the staff turnover is higher, just everything is just, I can say it 100 times, a big hot mess. He did say that on an individual level, if you want to support but you're not really sure how, donate to the Samaritans, and I believe the other one is called the Shannon Trust, who help support with literacy in prisons, but I will double check that. He also said for employers, if you're able, try giving an ex-prisoner a job and they might surprise you, because a lot of them are pretty hard workers. I gave this book 4 stars. Next I read another memoir, Francie's War by Francie Baronek Epstein. Like Rewitched, I read this for a reading vlog, and I've had this on my TBR for a really long time. I'm sure I saw it advertised on Instagram years ago, and I think my brother got it for me for one of my birthdays. I've definitely had this for a couple of years at least on my physical TBR though, and so I'm really happy that I've finally got to it and given it the time it deserves. Basically, we're following the story of Francie, who was a young Czechoslovak woman who got arrested on the grounds that she was Jewish, even though she wasn't religious in any way, but it was documented that her two of her grandparents were Jews. So they were like, nope, that's it, you count as a Jew as well and you're going to jail. And then she ended up in various concentration camps and just having a really awful time, obviously. But she tells all of the stories are focused on her own and other women's experiences, which a lot of history books don't hone in on the women's experiences. They're either on men or general, so that was a nice touch that it was focused on women. I love a war memoir. I find them absolutely fascinating and harrowing to read. This one didn't hit for me the way that some have. I'm thinking specifically of Three Sisters by Heather Morris. I thought it was an absolutely astonishing book. I thought this one was okay, and it's really awkward and difficult to say that without it sounding like this is someone's experience, someone's life. I'm not diminishing any of the things she felt or the way things went for her, but the storytelling isn't on the same level. Sorry if that is a controversial opinion. I gave this book 3 stars. This week I have been swapping my screen time for reading, and the first book I finished this week was The Life You Left Behind by Debbie Howells, and I don't know how to describe this, so I'm just going to read the back to you. It says, 2 strangers, 1 missed flight. It only takes a moment to change a life. 1 year ago, Casey Cassidy was happy. She had great friends, a wonderful teaching job and a busy life, until with 1 missed flight, everything changes. 1 year later, Casey knows what it means to find that once-in-a-lifetime love people dream of. But when Ben leaves, her heart is shattered. Left facing a year of firsts without him, piecing her life back together seems impossible. Then a friend offers her a home in rural France. In the solitude and emptiness, Casey needs to come to terms with what has happened and find a way to move forward. She has no idea where that will take her 1 year later. That is so misleading. And if you don't want the spoilers, skip ahead now. But that's made out that this man, the love of her life, has left her and walked out on her, or like broken her heart, and she's traumatized from this breakup, right? And the first kind of 150 pages of this book will lead you to believe that too. However, it got to page 150 and I was like, oh my god, he didn't leave her, he died. And then for the rest of the book you kind of understand that this man suffered from depression, and I think it's called solesthesia. I can't remember the exact word now, but basically he was so depressed and feeling genuine pain about the climate crisis, and it was just all consuming for him, and ultimately he killed himself. I feel like that's very risky to just put the blurb like that and then throw that in the middle of the book and then they end up talking about it in quite a lot of detail. Like I was fully crying at the end. Like, it's very emotional. It's dangerous to be throwing that in there as if it's nothing. I don't feel super good about that. But yeah, I liked this book, and I feel like it wasn't a bad book, but there were a lot of bad elements to it. It was not a lot, but a couple. First of all, like, it's told in a then and now timeline, right? And every single chapter alternates, so we always know. It says before and after at the chapters, at the top of every chapter. But in the behind scene, in the then ones, the whole thing is in italics, which is not the nicest to read. I just don't feel like it's necessary. You've told us it's from before. We know. Then there's this whole thing where she's reading some guy's diary that she found in the house in France. But the tense of the diary was really weird. Like, it was told in the past tense, but it was told as if the man was writing it years after it happened. But if you're writing a diary, it should be like, today I've done this, da 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 da. I went to the shop and then da la la la. But instead it's like, today I did that, I had been to the shop. Like, it feels too past tense. I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt like it wasn't quite right. And the use of the word frigging. If you don't want to swear in your book, don't swear in your book. But frigging is just so jarring to come up every few pages. I didn't like that. And the other thing that came up way more often than was necessary was wine. These people are obsessed with wine and drinking wine. And it was just too much for me. Like, I had a headache reading it. I don't need to know that you're drinking wine. Again, it doesn't add anything to the story. But there was some nice character development through it, and it wasn't all bad. I don't know how I feel about the whole plot twist. It's a bit dodgy. I gave this 3.25 stars. Then I finished my second audiobook of the month, which is just wild to me because I normally take months to read an audiobook. The first one I was talking about, a bit of a stretch, I started in August and finished early, maybe halfway through this month. Probably halfway actually. I started Someone Else's Shoes. One evening I had like an hour to do some housework, and then I had a 2-hour drive, and I got in my car and I was like, I want to keep reading it, which is not like me on a long drive. I like music, I don't want an audiobook, but I wanted to keep listening. So all good signs, and I actually finished it within the month too. So the book's called Someone Else's Shoes. It's by Jojo Moyes and it was narrated by Daisy Ridley, who I thought was a brilliant voice actor, and I had a look if she's narrated anything else, but unfortunately it's only like a 1-hour short story. If she narrates any more full-length novels, I will definitely listen to them because I thought she was really good. I did feel like she changed the accents up for the sake of it, just to be like, oh, it's a different character, but that was obvious from the context, and some of the accents I was just like, is this necessary? But okay. I read the first chapter and I was like, oh, Sam, one of the main characters, is quite annoying. She's quite judgmental of other people. So she's been to the gym and she's like, I don't know, your fairly average woman, right, or working mum, and she's judging all the yummy mummies basically. I just kind of feel like, get on with your life, let them get on with theirs. You don't need to make nasty comments about them under your breath, it's fine. But then I read the second chapter and Sam was like an angel compared to this woman. So the second main character is called Nisha, and she is the wife of a very, very, very rich man. And long story short, they accidentally swap bags in the changing room, and hence the name is called Someone Else's Shoes. They basically become intertwined with each other's lives. Nisha's very, very rich husband leaves her very early on in the book. Sam's husband is struggling with depression. She also has a really horrible manager at her job, which she's actually quite good at, but this manager is just beating her down. Nisha's got all this trouble going on with her husband, and their lives kind of wind together in ways that they would never have expected. The storyline was quite far-fetched in some places and it was a bit ridiculous, but I had such a fun time listening to it. Nisha, I took a little bit of issue with Nisha because there were moments where you could see like, oh, under the surface, she's actually quite a nice person. She's got a good heart in there. But there were other times where I'm like, you're just genuinely not a nice person. I get it if you've got your guard up, people have hurt you, you're trying to protect yourself, but there's a difference between that and just being straight up nasty, which at times I do feel like she was. But yeah, this was a fun read. I enjoyed it and I gave it 4.25 stars, which is my highest rated book of the month. And finally, I finished On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. I picked this up because obviously there are things going on in the world right now that need to be learned about and need to be talked about. And I wanted to learn about them because truthfully, I didn't really know anything about the Palestine-Israel conflict or any of Palestine's history before I read this. But truthfully, I still don't. I don't think this was an accessible book for someone who is just starting out their kind of education on the subject, which is maybe my own fault because maybe I should know more about it already, but this is me trying. I think I needed to start with something different because this book is basically a conversation between three people who very clearly already know a lot about the subject, and they sprinkle in little bits of political history, making comparisons and references that I just didn't understand. So that made the rest of what they were trying to say also really difficult for me to understand. I think if you already know a bit about the situation and you want to learn more, then this, or you want to kind of ground that knowledge in a bit more, then this is a good read. But if you're just starting out and trying to just understand the basics of it, honestly, I don't think this is the place to start. I think get your hands on it and keep hold of it until you're ready, or even read it now and then read it again later on. I might do that, but so much of this just went straight over my head. My favourite part was the start of chapter 5, where Ilan Pappé was talking about his experience being an Israeli man but openly supporting the Palestine side. And for me, I think because it was personal, it made it so much more engaging and I found it much easier to focus on what I was reading. So maybe that's a way for me to move forward, is to read about it from some more personal points of view. But I did make a couple of notes that I would like to share. We live in a time when taking a step back and a deep breath have become a luxury that many cannot afford. When an Israeli soldier sees a Palestinian baby, he does not see an infant, he sees the enemy. Which is just horrible. That's just, and horrible doesn't sound like a good enough word to describe it because it's just disgusting. And same with, I don't think this is a direct quote, but Israeli experts determined exactly how many calories Gazans needed for bare survival. How can a person treat other people like that? I don't know. It's horrendous. But there was some good food for thought in here. I don't want to make it sound awful. If you think that it would be a good read for you, then please pick it up. Even if you're not sure, pick it up. But don't expect to come out of it knowing loads if you go in knowing nothing. I think that's kind of what I mean. I'm undecided on a rating for that one at the moment. I think because I only finished it just a couple of days ago, I need to stew on it a little bit. So those are all 7 books that I read in October. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me talk about them, and I will see you in the next one. Have a wicked November!